Hi, I'm Ashy, and today I'm continuing my birth month animal series with August, which is the monkey. So for this series, I wanted to do something birth month related, but not birthstones. So I found this list of birth month animals, and I was pretty excited about that idea. So for monkey, I chose specifically a capuchin monkey because I thought it was cute. So that's why I chose it, and kind of fluffy and adorable. So I did 3 different styles of the monkey. I did a more traditional version, more whimsical version with flowers, and then a baby like cartoony version, just to appeal to different styles and different tastes. So I hope you find one that you like and you give it a go. If you don't want to try one or all of them, I do have prints available for purchase as cards in my shop at shop.craftywithashy.com. So you can check that out if you're interested. For the tutorials, these are sped up. Each one takes about an hour, so it would just be too much to have 3 hours worth of video for each one of these. So I sped it up and kept all of the actual content in the video. So you're gonna see every step from start to finish, just sped up. And I also kept in my real-time instructions that I was talking while painting it, so you can hear my thought process and the techniques that I use for each step. I just speed up the video kind of around my instructions. So I hope you find these helpful. Let's dive into the tutorials. Starting with the first monkey here. This type of monkey is going to be a capuchin monkey. I can't pronounce it. But anyway, it's just the monkey that I decided on. And my first monkey is going to be kind of sitting on a tree branch. So I'm going to draw in the branch first and then draw the monkey sitting on top of it. So now I'm going to start with just getting in the basic shapes, not really even shapes, just get the placement for the feet here on the branches, because that's going to guide me to where the body of the monkey is. So I'm holding the branch here. Okay. And again, I need this guide to get an idea of where the rest of the body is going to be placed. So this arm's going to come up this way and angle toward where his shoulder will be. And this arm is going to come and he's holding this branch here, and kind of just get the basic idea of his forearm. Now, monkeys they're shaped a lot like humans, so I'm going to be referring to all these pieces like humans. And then his shoulder is going to come down this direction. And then we have the leg coming up to kind of like a point here. And that's that leg there, kind of thigh here. And then his back's going to come up along from almost kind of the point of that leg, just in from that, come up this way toward his head. So this shoulder needs to be a little bit higher, and just kind of getting the proportions here. And then his head, like so. Okay, his other foot's right here, just standing on this part of the branch, and then that other kind of thigh area, just like that. And then we have just some hair and stuff coming to this arm. Okay. And then just to get an idea of some of the color patterns for the fur, and that'll help me kind of get an idea on how this arm is positioned. So. And okay. It's kind of wide here. That's where the elbow is. And then it comes up, and again, we're just kind of furry here, hairy. And then he's got his tail coming down back here. And then the tail gonna come out this way. You'll see it between, and then it gets kind of long and tapers just a little bit. And then back here, it's just all going to be dark. You're not really going to see much detail in that area. So now I can go in and edit the shapes. So for his head, we're going to start by kind of firming up where that chin is. And then he's got really fluffy head, basically. So I'm just kind of leave that a little bit undefined, because I'll just paint that in and get the edges with the paint, but his head is just slightly pointed, and then he's got like a little hat of dark hair. The rest of his head is very light. And then we have like almost a heart shape on the top for where the fur stops and kind of his actual face begins. So get that little sweetheart shape. And then we're gonna come down kind of straight-ish on the sides, slight curve there. And it curves in just a little bit. And then we have his mouth here. So do like the top half of a heart, and then do a U shape for the bottom part. And then his mouth is just splitting this U, and it's an upside down V shape. So it's a little tiny point in the middle. Up from that, we have kind of a line down the center of his face, and then nostrils, his nose is kind of flat, and you just see slits slanted. And then we have the eyes, which again, I'm gonna do like a U shape to start with, and it's just gonna come up, and the inside edge of the eye is gonna hit the same like line as the outside edge of the nostril on both sides. And he's staring straight at us, so he's gonna be pretty symmetrical. For the top of the eyelid, we just kind of put a line across the top of the U. He's got a real prominent like eyebrow area, and it's real wrinkly, but we'll kind of paint that in and not worry about drawing it too much. I need to define the hands and feet, so the rest is just like fur. So it's not gonna need to be defined at all as long as our shapes are good, but the feet are gonna have to be defined. So I'm gonna erase this kind of placeholder that I had here. And so we get a little angle out and then an angle in slightly. And then this is where his toes start to curl down, so they angle back out. So it's like a little lightning bolt shape. And then they curl one more time back in. For the other side, it's gonna angle out basically to a point, and they have kind of like thumbs on their feet also, right? So it kind of angles out, and then we just have one angle back in, and that's kind of the thumb shape. We can put in a little humpy part here of the thumb, and then comes down to the pad. Okay? And then his other toes meet up. He's kind of pinching his thumb and first finger together. I'm just doing a line following that, and then down and curving at the tip. It's the same. That's the first finger. Here's the second finger, or well, middle finger, right? Pointer, middle. So we got middle finger now. So this one's a little bit longer. Okay. And then we have fourth finger, so we get shorter again, right? And then we have the little pinky that's kind of tucked in, and you're not seeing all of it. So there is our little foot. And coming into it, again, it's just kind of furry, and so we don't have to get that really defined. For his other back foot, we had the thigh coming here, and then his foot's just kind of peeking out and landing on this little branch here. I'm just gonna kind of do a line across, angle it down. You're gonna see just a little bit of some curves here. Nothing crazy. Can't really see that foot, so we just have like two little fingers showing. You can add a little third one if you want, a little line, but you're not really gonna see that. Now the hands, we're gonna do this guy coming down into the wrist. This one, his hands clasped pretty good, so you're not gonna see the thumb, it's behind, but you're gonna see just the lines. I'm angling one a little bit and then angling back, like little V shape, right? And so you're just doing that to get little joints there. If you just do straight lines, it doesn't look as realistic because they're curved around, right? So they're gonna be bent. For his other hand, you can see his thumb coming over the top here. So here's our branch, and we have the thumb here. So it's almost just like a little circle, okay? And then it connects back to the hand, and that's a thumb. Same for the fingers under the branch. We want our pointer finger to be just like a little circle, but you're gonna flatten out the bottom, so gumdrop shape. And then separate it. The next one, this one's a little bit longer, so it's gonna go more around the branch. Third one, they're basically just little gumdrop shapes, okay? So nothing crazy. And then it gives the impression of a hand, okay? So don't necessarily think about painting a hand, just think about painting shapes, and it will give that impression. And there is our drawing for the monkey. I'm gonna take my kneaded eraser and lighten up the entire sketch here. So I'm just gonna roll the kneaded eraser over it. This monkey is brownish black and cream, but the cream is like the chest and the head. So that doesn't really have a lot of pencil marks anyway. All these other pencil marks can stay pretty dark because we're gonna be painting really dark paint over it. Okay, I'm gonna start with a 16 round, and I'm gonna start with my lighter color. So this well had basically yellow ochre in it, very light wash. It does have a little bit of my lemon yellow deep, probably some slight pinks and purples that I've used previously, but mostly it's yellow ochre. Okay, and I'm gonna take a little bit more yellow ochre and then just really watery. And I'm gonna start by doing a wash of this color over the whole monkey just to get that started, and then I can work some wet on wet in here. So it's almost like painting with clean water. I'm going straight over his face. I'm not worried about painting around anything at this point. This is a very light wash. Everything else can be painted over it. Not too worried about the hands. Again, it's all gonna be dark, so if you miss a little bit of areas, it's not that big of a deal. Tail too, just make sure it's all evenly wet here. Again, I don't clean my palette, so these wells do have mixes already in them, but this is essentially Payne's Gray and Burnt Umber. I'm gonna work with that combo for the color on the monkey. I might add a little bit of like pinks into it at some point. I don't know, we'll see. But I'm gonna take that color and just kind of tap it in to where the dark areas on the monkey are, which is everything except for like the arms and chest. Okay. The tail is going to be very dark, so I'm actually getting more of that color in already. So this is thicker paint, but also just more Payne's Gray. Take a little bit of that to tap into the darkest areas. So like this like belly part is going to be super dark because it's all just in the shadow. So I can just add that in now and not worry about it. And get a little bit in his arms. Okay, I'm gonna rinse that and get my lighter color, so less paint, and tap it in to some of these transition areas, and that'll give it that like washed out transition look there. So same on this arm. It's kind of got some transition areas. I'm just gonna kind of tap that in and down here along the chest where it transitions from the light to the dark. Come back in with the dark, add that in this area behind. So this is his back leg. It's nice and dark. This leg here, add a little bit more. And I am kind of just tapping along the edge so that it's bumpy, so that it looks kind of hairy. I don't want it to be a nice smooth edge there. Now, top of his head, not very much water here. Let me get more brown color because there's so much light up here that it'd be a little bit warmer. And there's his little hat. Okay. Taking a clean brush and just kind of rubbing it along the edge there. Very little water, but that'll kind of loosen up that edge so that it's not as straight of a line or as firm of a line, so it's gonna kind of feather it out. Oops, that was a lot of water. So I'm gonna get a cauliflower there. So I just dropped a ton of water in, so I'm just gonna take a little bit more paint and get it in there. This branch is gonna be in front of the tail, but behind the foot. So I'm just gonna kind of pull out some of that paint, lifting out, and then I'll go over that later. But that'll kind of help define the edge of the foot there and demonstrate where the tail is separate from the foot. Okay. The tail goes behind this other branch too, but it's so fluffy that it kind of goes over it, but I'll go ahead and blend that area out too, just to indicate where the branch is versus the tail. Okay. Just a little bit of fluff over it. There we go. Okay, now I'm gonna let that layer dry and then work on the next layer. So I'm switching to my size 8 round, and I'm gonna get just a little bit of pink. So this is mostly permanent rose, but a little bit of green and probably some of my reds and purples in there too. And I'm gonna take a wash of that and just wash it lightly over the face, just to give him a little bit of that pink undertone. And then I'm gonna take a little bit of that and put it into his chest as well. And a little bit on top into the rest of the light colored fur. Now I'm gonna get some texture into the tan parts here. So I'm gonna take a little bit of yellow ochre, very little water on my brush, and dry brush over his chest. And then same for around his face, so the fur of his head. Okay, and then I'm gonna get in a little bit of some shadows here. So this is just more concentrated yellow ochre. I'm gonna take a very small amount of burnt umber to darken it. And I'm gonna put that color in around his face where there's some shadows. And we'll kind of blend that out. A little bit of wet on wet there. Okay, same thing down here to separate his chest from his head. I'm just kind of tapping that along to get a broken edge so that it's not, so that it looks like it's hairy also. Okay, a little bit of gray. Blend that out. So I started wet on dry there and then transitioned into wet on wet to add the darker gray part of the shadow. Now I'm going to add some separation here from the arm to the chest. Same here. So just a little bit of color, blending it up. So dry brushing here into that transitional area to get some of this dark color up into the tan, and to get some of the texture of the fur. So here I'm kind of going vertically so that it looks like the hairs are hanging down from his arm, and then here I'm gonna go along the angle of his arm so that the hairs are growing that direction. This part of his arm's not as fluffy as the under part of his arm, like his tricep area. And then he's got some fluff coming out this way, so just kind of break up those bristles and add some little hairs coming out that way. Just a little bit more. This side there, lighter color, same idea, make him look fluffy. And then transition between these two areas. We're gonna have the same like fluffy look. A little bit of darker color, so this is mostly burnt umber to get some shadows, get a little bit of my gray to get some shadows into his chest. Take my dark color again and add darkness in to this arm. Dry brushing again, a little bit more blue for the darkest areas that are in the shadow, because that would be a cooler color because it's in the shadow. Add that in, a little bit of texture, come back toward that warmer color, and add in a little bit more darkness and texture to this leg. All kind of fluffy marks. Okay, drag a little of that paint down to look like fur. A little bit more brown in it. Okay. A little bit on the back. Okay, I'm gonna go in and do the hands now. So I'm gonna get a nice thick mixture of my Payne's Gray and burnt umber and just go for it. So again, here we had our angle out and then angle back in, a little pad, and then the little tip of the finger or thumb. Take off some of the paint and use what's on there. This one's a little bit longer. Give just a little bit of a highlight in between them just to get a little bit of separation. There we go, right? So not crazy difficult, just some drags of the brush, okay? Now take a little bit more in the paint and add some furriness up at the top and drag it in to the rest of the leg so that it blends out nicely. Now, same thing for this front hand. It's just the little finger dots basically, and add those in. So I'm just painting those little gumdrop shapes that I had drawn, letting some of them touch and kind of let it happen organically. You have your basic guide of where they belong, and then you can edit it as you see fit. Now Now for this back one, this one's again nice and simple, just a couple little shapes. Leave just a little bit of your, it's not white because we painted yellow ochre on it, but leave just a little bit of space for a little highlight. That foot, this front hand. So I rinsed off the brush, drug the color out, and then now I'm just adding in some more wet on wet because I lost some of the shape. I'll go in and do some shadows later once it's dry. But overall, I think it's still pretty good there. Okay, take a little bit more brown and just get that transition in between hand and arm. A little bit more of my blue and get that in my darker areas again. Okay, now for his face, we're gonna do the mouth and just basically our dark mixture of the burnt umber and Payne's gray, leaning toward burnt umber. Just follow that line that we had drawn. And I'm just using the very, very tip of this brush. If you're more comfortable, go down to a smaller brush, but this comes to a very fine point, so I'm okay with it. And then I'm gonna add in the nostrils, so just little dots basically. His eyes are gonna be that same color. I wanna be cautious not to fill in the whole eye. We need to have a highlight to make the eyes look alive and more realistic and not flat. So leaving a little bit of unpainted space when you're painting eyes is super, super important. So I kind of just dot in. Instead of actually trying to paint in, I literally dot in the color. Rinsing out my brush, but keeping a little bit of that color on to get some of his little wrinkles in. So he's got like a little line down the middle of his face, and then he's got some wrinkles over his like little eyebrow wrinkles. So I'm just dotting in some color here and take a little bit of that color in the shape of the face. It's also just adding some shadows there. Get just a little shadow under the nose, along the chin, a little shadow. Some shadow here where the hair would be shading the face a little bit. Okay, I think that's pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that actually. So now I'm gonna paint my branch. So I'm just gonna take some burnt umber to take over this well. A little bit of burnt sienna to make it a little bit more orange. And I'm gonna paint in my branch. And I am just going over those fingers because they're so dark, you're not gonna mess with them too much by going over them. But you don't wanna rub a lot because you can lift and like smudge it basically. Okay, now I'm gonna add some shadows into the branch. So I'm just taking basically my monkey color and dropping that in to the darkest spots on the branch. So the underside, and then under this monkey is super dark, right? Because he's shadowing it. Now, after I get this last little shadow in, we'll let it dry and then go back and add in some details. So now that it's dry, I can come back and do some detail. So I'm gonna add just a little bit of texture, the dry brushing on the branch, firm up the top edge of this branch. This area would be in shadow anyway because his arm's there. And drag that out. Now to add a little bit more detail on this hand. So my Payne's gray and burnt umber mix, nice and dark. And I'm gonna add just a little bit of those lines, those marks in between the fingers. So you're seeing just a little bit of shadow. Clean off my brush, try it and blend it out just a little bit up into the hand a little bit too, because you'd have the tendons that would add some texture onto the back of the hand. Add a little bit more to these little fingers. To this other hand, I don't want any white space in between there. And it's pretty good. Now I'm gonna add just a little bit more into the tail. Make it look nice and fluffy. That tail's still wet. I'm intentionally doing this while that tail's still wet. I want to get a little bit of some back runs here into that and just let that bleed out into this side a little bit. Okay, so just adding a lot of clean water. So here it's like running down, so I'm gonna lift up just a little bit of that water, and then there we go, just a little bit, not much. And then I'm gonna take some of my brown and splatter it in, focusing more on the left side here. I want the right side to be a little bit cleaner. Some yellow ochre as well, and this is lighter, so it can come over onto this kind of cleaner side a little bit, still focusing more on the left side, a little bit on the right. And then I just want to do a tiny bit of this pink. It's gonna blend in with the rest, so it's not gonna really scream pink, but it's just gonna warm it up a little bit. I'm taking a nearly dry brush and just dragging it along the tail so that I can clean up a little bit of the backgrounds that I have going on there. I want it to run kind of all the way to the tail, not just in part of it. And then I'm gonna add in some very thick paint, and it's gonna stay mostly where I put it. It's not gonna go very far because again, it's very thick, and I'm just tapping that in, and that'll make it a nice fluffy tail. I might do just a little bit of that along the edge of this leg as well. Nice and fluffy. And I left this little bit of a highlight on this part of the leg so that I got some separation between the body and the leg. So that was an intentional highlight there. Just a little bit more texture and a little bit more color. Now we need to let that dry, and I want to let it dry naturally to let the effects from all this water happen in its own time. If you heat it to dry it, it changes the look because it speeds it up and stabilizes it. So if you like where it is, go ahead and heat it, and then it'll kind of stop the effects of the water. But if you want to let it kind of do the rest of its magic, let it go. Now just a little bit more splatters, and I'm using a stiffer brush for this for a little bit more control on the splatters. It's a little bit easier also. And there's our first version of the monkey. For our second version, we're gonna have the same type of monkey, and then it's gonna be kind of sitting in a field of flowers. So I'm gonna start by just getting in where the top of his head is gonna go, so that he's high enough up on, or she is high enough up on the page, and then work my way down for this one. The head kind of comes down fairly straight, so the top is curved and then the sides are like boxier. We have an arm coming off this direction, so we have a little bit of an angle down, and then it kind of angles back up. The second arm is going to kind of meet that first arm here and come down to the hand. Bottom part of its arm is a subtle curve here. So here we have the lighter portion getting in that color change area, so that I have an idea of where that happens. So this arm is all going to be dark, and then this part of the arm is going to be dark. But this is going to be like the light shoulder area. We can get in where the bottom of the head is. So kind of like right here, and it just kind of fluffs out. So you're not really going to see much in terms of where the head ends like that. It's just fluffy. And then we have the little like heart shape again, like we had on the last one. And then we're going to do the U shape for the bottom part. Bigger. Here. Okay, its mouth is going to come across here. Nose, just those little slots again. And then the eyes. So this one isn't like scrunching down its eyebrows like the other one was. This one's going to be a much more like open and happy look. So this one has a lot rounder eyes, and then has little eyebrow ridges here, little nose, and then its little hat is going to be here. Okay, so again, that top part's going to be dark there on top of the head. Its back is kind of hunched over, so its back's kind of up like this, and then curves down. Then we have the little back feet here, which we're not really going to see, so I'm not going to worry about drawing them in very precisely. And then he just kind of have his little haunches there. Make him a little bit bigger. Go down farther. I think it was better before, so go ahead and erase that and come back to that original kind of idea that I had. Maybe I should do a tail here. They do have really big tails. I can do that. I'm gonna get the hand in here. Have the forearm come down, and then little knuckles. So I'm doing 4 bumps for the knuckles, and I have a flower coming up this direction that he's holding. So just like essentially little ovals for those fingers. And then you would see the thumb come around somewhere. So I'm gonna put the thumb there. He's holding that flower there. This arm, instead of coming out that way, maybe it's coming down and kind of supporting himself down this way. So we'd still have this area that's all dark, and then his hand would just kind of be hiding behind there. Maybe I kind of put an indication of his hand here. This whole area is just going to be filled with some flowers. So these are going to be gladiolas, which are nice, tall, like stocky flowers. These ones around the side don't matter so much, but these ones in front are going to matter because I can't paint the bright flowers over the dark monkey. So I'll have to leave that space unpainted, indicating where I'll put some of the flowers. I'll just kind of leave some gaps in when I'm painting and then fill them with flowers. So it doesn't all have to be marked out in advance. But now I'm gonna go ahead and lighten up the sketch. I'm gonna start with a medium and 8 round because with this one, I have to paint around all the like flower shapes. I don't wanna have too much water and lack of control. 8 round, nice light wash of yellow ochre. I'm gonna start with just doing a wash over the monkey. Take in my dark mix of burnt umber and Payne's gray. Drag that along the dark areas. Okay, just some shadows here under the head to separate it from the body. A little bit of pink on the face. Okay, so right now it looks like a mess. That's okay. We'll pull it together. Just adding water all the way around, and I'm gonna add in some bright oranges, some reddish color oranges for my gladiolas. So I'm gonna take some of that and start to drop it in, and then just gonna splatter some of that color just to get like a hint of maybe there's some more going on in the background. For my greens, I'm gonna use bluish green to contrast with the orange there. I'm mixing in some hooker's green, and I have some aqua green here. That'll make it much more bluey. I'm gonna start by splattering some of that in, and then take some of that mix and start to add in some greens to the bottom. And gladiolas have like these long leaves coming up with them. So I'm just doing really like linear strokes here for the leaves. You can throw in a little bit of other green. So this one's olive green that I mixed with it just to add a bit of contrast. And I just want to put in a bunch kind of around the monkey to make him stand out, but also to look like incorporated in with the scene here. I like how this, because it's warping just a little bit, how it looks like swirled. I think that looks cool. Okay, I do need to let it dry, and then I can go in and add and make these actually look like flowers instead of just blobs of paint, even though that's what they are. So now that that layer is dry, we can come back to adding some details to the monkey and finishing up the flowers. So I'm gonna take some of my dark mixture, add a little bit more paint to it. We're gonna start with the mouth, following that line that we drew before, and then the little slits for the nostrils, and then eyes. Start with just the outline, and then leave a nice highlight by just dotting around. And just a little bit more darkness into that. And make that highlight really stand out. Okay. Now I'm gonna remove some of that color and add burnt umber into my red well here and just get like a pinkish brown tone. Remove a lot of that paint, and then I'm gonna add in the rest of the facial features. So like some of the wrinkles and the shadows. Some areas on the face here. go back to my normal like shadowy color and add a little bit of that under. And this part where we're adding these subtle shadows is what's really going to make it pop and not look flat. Now to define the edge of the face just a little bit more. And then I'm going to take some of my light color here, so my yellow ochre mix, a little bit of burnt umber to it, and add some texture around the face, and then a little bit grayer version to add texture and shadow down here. So now I'm going to go back and work on my florals. So this is like my orange color. Okay, so again, these are gladiolas, and they are little, like, not little, they're giant, spiky flowers, and they get pretty dense with the florals. And I'm just doing it very loosely, so I'm following where I had previously added it to look like a branch, and then just adding in dots around. And if I use this color in its undiluted form, it can actually go over some of these dark areas. So it's fairly opaque. So that's a benefit of using this color for the flowers. With the dark monkey, I can still paint over some of these areas and add in more detail if I want to. Generally, I'm getting a little bit larger as I go down the stalk also. And that helps to make it look, even though it's really loose, make it look a little bit more realistic. Kind of merge together at the bottom. A little bit more splatter, and that'll give the impression of more florals just kind of in the background. I want to loosen them up, so I'm splattering in some clean water over that, and it'll just kind of randomly loosen it up some. A little bit lighter wash here. Add a little bit more orange into the background in that lighter color, some brighter orange. And I'm just going to kind of dot some in to the foreground. Now I'm going to let that dry before I do the greens, just so that it doesn't turn straight brown. Adding just a little bit more to some of these foreground dots because I don't like how transparent they are. For the greens, I'm going to go back to my mixture of Hooker's green and aqua green, and then I can use just a little bit of my orange to tone it down and mute it a little bit. And then I'm just going to start getting in some of the stems here, and I'm starting with the one that the monkey's holding because I feel like that's the most prominent one, the most important one. It can come all the way down off the paper, and then just some little dots and dashes to show where some of the flowers are actually attached to it. So I'm keeping these ones pretty dark, pretty opaque, one value basically, because I'm having to go over some of the dark areas with the monkey, so I just need it to be pretty opaque. But as I move out away from the monkey, I can lighten some of them up to get some variety. Now I have grown gladiolus before, and they bend and tip over because they get so heavy. So I'm gonna do some just kind of lines off to the side like they're tipping. Some are straighter up, some have lost some of their flowers also. Just add in some looser, lighter colors. And here I'm not worried about going around or to or anything with the blobs of orange. I'm just adding some little tiny light stripes just to give the impression of some stalks sticking up in the back. And the value matches the value of the ones in the back, so they're really pale. Now I can add some leaves. And here I'm basically just pressing down and then flicking, and that's going to get some dry brush texture. It's going to get a little bit of a variety of values, and it gets that nice point at the top. So if I press down a little bit and then flick up, I get a little bit thicker and then a nice point. So it's just a fun and easy way to create some leaf shapes. And if you kind of twist your brush as you go up, it'll change the angle too. The greens that I'm using here are pretty transparent, so I'm just going right over the oranges. The oranges are very opaque, they're gonna show through, so I'm not worried about that. I do want to add some more intentional greens kind of under the tail to blend that tail in a little bit more. And then from there, I'm gonna pull them down just to incorporate them a little bit better. And then I'm gonna add some splatters of that color. So lots of water to get it nice and loose so that it comes off the brush easy. Now lots of water to make it a light value for the background. And then step back and make sure there's nothing else I want to add. I think it's good, just let it dry and then sign it. And that'll be our second version of the monkey. For the baby monkey, I'm gonna have the monkey holding like a ball. So it's just kind of playing, and we're gonna start with drawing the head shape because I want to get it high enough on the page and large enough. And this is gonna be a capuchin monkey like the other ones. Just kind of getting the general shape in first, and then its arm kind of comes from here and comes around. Make it a little bit angular here, so a little bit of an elbow. Here starts up, and then we're gonna have the hand here. So we start with kind of the thumb, and it's gonna be just a little bit of a angle there. Gets bent, little pads and muscles there, and then the hand comes up into nice long fingers. So just for fingers, just slight angles to make them look not so stiff or flat. So they have some move to them. There's the middle finger, curves around the tip, back up, following that same curve, comes out just a little bit, and it's gonna have it get separated. And there's the hand, okay, and that's gonna be on a ball here. So we get a nice big circle shape here for the ball. This other arm kind of comes from back here and goes to this side, so you don't really see it. This chest is not going to be in front of the arm anyway. For the bottom half, I'm going to have the back foot behind the ball, so you're not going to see it, but this front foot, you are going to see just a little bit. I'm just going to kind of get an indication of that in there. It's kind of tucked in under his legs. You can see toes. It's kind of fluffy on top. Bring the ball in just a little bit farther. I don't have to worry about too much in here. It's just going to be dark for his head. You need to get the little heart shape part in and kind of exaggerate the heart shape for this baby monkey because he's kind of going to be like cartoony. Nice big heart. And then the U shape bottom. We're going to put big eyes. So just big circles in the top of heart areas, and then have the nose here, and then the mouth, and I'm gonna have his mouth open a little bit. So I'm still gonna start kind of that, like drawing up, you know, those simple birds where it's just like a little upside down V shape, but his tongue kind of sticking out like that. So that's tongue, and this will be kind of filled in darkness. He's gonna be looking down toward the ball. So we're gonna leave this space white and then put his actual iris over here. Lift this heart part just a little bit so that I can have some like eyebrow ridges. So I need some space for that. So that's where the fur is gonna start, and then underneath is gonna be some eyebrow ridges. That should be good. So now I lighten up that sketch. Now on the ball, I'm just gonna kind of clean up the lines that I don't need, because to get that good circle, I went around a bunch of times and I made it bigger. So all those inside lines, I don't need it. Just kind of get some indication of where there might be some shading. Okay, I'm gonna start with the same method that I used on the other two with my yellow ochre mix. Lighten it up even more. And this is a nice big size 16 round brush. And I'm just gonna paint over the entire monkey. I am gonna avoid this one's eyes because I really want that white of the eye to be very white, and I want the highlight on the pupil to be really light as well. The ball is gonna be darker too, so I'm actually gonna just go ahead and put the wash on the ball as well so that it doesn't have any hard edges. Okay, there we go. So it's all painted except for the eyes, and then I'm going to take my dark mix here and add it in to the dark areas. Here it's starting to dry, so I'm going to clean out my brush and add just a little bit more water to that area so that it blends out. I'm going to take a little bit darker mix and add this little hat part, a little bit more darkness in there. So in the darker areas, so on the belly part here, it's just going to be essentially a dark shadow. So I'm adding that in and then letting that blend in with some of the other areas. Rinse, dry, push some of that paint around. Just a little bit of a highlight there where the leg, to just kind of separate the leg from the belly. a little bit more of my yellow ochre mix, tapped along the edges to get some warmth in there and a soft transition between those colors. Okay. Now, just add a tiny bit more darkness to the back arm here, adding these very small amount of water along the edge just to get rid of that really harsh edge line there. Blend out a little bit, feather out, and look a little bit furry. Okay, now at this point I want to let it dry and then I can come back and start defining some more of the shadow areas. So now we're going to move to a smaller brush and work on defining some areas. So this is a size 8 round, and I'm going to take my same dark mixture, a little bit more gray to it, and I'm going to define the area around the ball here under the arm, and then just darken this area up. A little bit of water and just drag it out into the back. And I am just touching it on the highlight area so that it's not a real hard edge there. And then same along the edge of the arm, because I want that to look furry, right? Hairy. So I don't want it to be a really hard defined edge. And do the same thing for the back arm here. I'm just adding a wash of yellow ochre so that those kind of blend nicely. Okay, now I'm gonna go and add in some of my darker color, here to the hand area. Lean off my brush a little bit, dry it, and then drag it out into that yellow ochre area that I added. I want that to go up into the forearm area here, and then kind of the same thing for the foot. I'm adding that darkness right around the foot and then dragging it back into the leg some. There we go. I'm pretty happy with the fur look on the monkey, so I'm gonna leave that there. And then I'm gonna work on the face and the ball. So get the face going. Just some of the yellow ochre, a little bit of pink to get this heart shape painted in. A little bit more pink. There we go. Going around the eyes so that maintains that nice highlight. And I can go over the mouth because the tongue is going to be pink anyway. Okay. And then just for a little bit of shadow above the eyes, along the side of the nose, around the edge of the nose, out a little bit under the tongue, then just a little bit on either side of the mouth. Okay, edge of the face just a little bit. It's pretty good. Now I'm gonna do some yellow ochre, very little paint, very little water, dry brushing along the face to get some texture and just a little bit more color. A little bit darker in some areas. Add some of my shadow mix. A little bit of shadow underneath here. A little bit more shadow here. Okay. Now I need some shadow underneath the chin. And I'm just lightening it up as I get farther away from the face, where there would be a little bit less shadow. Okay. A little bit more on the edge of the face over here. Give it that roundness and show where the edge is because it was kind of fading out. All right, now for the rest of the facial features. So I'm gonna get my dark mix for the nostrils and I'm gonna get my pink tongue in, a little bit of darker color, so it's a little bit of brown, maybe a little bit of purple in the back part for a shadow. That in there. Now for the eyes, I'm gonna do green eyes, and I'm gonna do the hooker's green and aqua green mix to make it like a bluey green. So I'm gonna add that color around the circle that I had drawn, just dot it in, and I want to make sure to leave enough white that it will have this highlight. Then I'll add in the black in a second. I add in some darker around the nostrils, mouth, darkness there, and then I'll add the darkness over the tongue in a second once it dries. I can come back now and do the hands here. Actually, I think I'm gonna do the ball before the hands to get it a little bit light. And since those hands are gonna be darker, I can go over them. This color, it'll just give it like an undertone of the orange, which I'm okay with because the fur on the hands is a little bit lighter and more transparent. So it's okay if it has that little bit of undertone. I am trying to avoid going over the arm, though not succeeding completely. Get that nice and evenly wet, so I don't want any puddles. Okay. And then I can go in and add some darker color to it. I want it to be nice, vivid orange here. Add a little more. Okay. Now I want to add a little bit of shadow. So I'm gonna take a little bit of my green that I had, and I can take that and add it along the edge for some shadow underneath the arm here. Hand be shadowed orange as well. I think that's decent shading on the ball already. So now I'm gonna go back to my smaller brush and add in that top kind of darkness along the top lip. And I can add in my pupils now. So I'm just gonna dot it around. Again, I wanna make sure I'm leaving highlight. Good. And then I'm gonna add just a touch of shadow along the top of the eye. Okay, along the bottom also is to kind of outline it and give it that round shape. A little bit more shading face here. Okay. I do want to put a little highlight on the orange ball, so just gonna lift some of that color off. And it's still a little bit damp, it's not all the way dry. So I just take a damp brush, drag it along different areas, just take a bit more and add it back. Here we go. Okay, now I'm gonna dry it and then paint the hands and feet. And add a tiny bit more pink to the tongue. There we go. All right. Hands and feet, we're gonna have a little bit more brown to the Payne's Gray mix. And then it's gonna have that orange undertone because of painting the ball over the hands. Just put in those shapes that we drawn previously. Just kind of reactivating that was on the dark gray. Blend that out a little into it. And foot. Let that dry and then I'll add some shadows into the hand and foot. Same mix, just a little bit thicker. And I'm gonna add just some lines, shadows. So kind of under the fingers and a little bit between is what I'm focusing on. And then just a few little lines on top to look like little knuckle wrinkles. And then those lines kind of come back into the hand because that's where the shadows of the tendons would be connected. Okay, same idea here. So just a little bit of darkness to separate out the toes. Now we're gonna add our ground. So I'm gonna take my green here. I'm gonna add olive green to it. Add a little bit of my orange mix here to really tone it down. Even a little bit more of the orange. There we go. And then that's what I'm gonna use on the ground here. I'm just kind of painting it around the monkey and the ball. And take a little bit of clean water, a bit of clean water, and drop it in to make it bleed and get some cauliflowers. And then take a darker mix of the same colors and put it underneath the monkey and the ball so that there's a shadow, a little bit more orange. Take some cleanish water up to the top around the monkey-ish. Add in a little bit of yellow, give it a little glow, and then maybe a little bit of blue for sky color. Subtle though, not anything too bright. So lots of water, and then not blending it with that yellow part because then it'll just turn green. Okay, lots of water, not on the monkey, just dry off the monkey. I do want to soften the edges of the monkey a little bit where it's sitting on the grass. And then same with the ball, kind of soften up that edge a little bit on the ball. Add a bit of water, dab it, and then I can go back in and add my green. Now once that's dry, I can add just a little bit more detail in for the ground, for the grasses. This is getting a cauliflower here because part of it's wet and part of it's not. So I'm just gonna get the rest of it very damp, carefully, not lifting it, just adding a very small amount of water. A little bit of my dark paint and we can blend with the grasses a little bit. Just gonna add a little bit of splatters of clean water into some of those shadow areas. Give it some texture. So for some grasses, now that this is dry, I'm gonna take my same mix and just kind of dry brush Well, it's dryish. I thought it was dry. Okay, I'm gonna dry this and then do a little bit more. We'll get some darker mix, thicker, same thing. Now I'm gonna take some of my orange and just kind of glaze it on, but trying to, so some of the areas I'm not just glazing, I'm trying to lift some of these cauliflowers that I don't want. Okay, and then lift out a little bit of a highlight again. So because this is now more dry, I'm gonna have to work a little bit more at lifting than I did before. Just a little bit more water and a little bit more pressure to lift out that highlight. Add in a little bit more of the bright orange right around it. Now some splatters. So I'm gonna take my green first, nice large brush, add in some splatters, just a little bit of yellow and a tad bit of my blue as well. Just sign it and then we are all done.
Thank you so much for watching today. I really hope you enjoyed it. And just remember that these cards are available for sale on my website if you don't feel like having a go at it yourself. Have an awesome day.